Good morning, friends. It's Jessica from Three Rivers Homestead, and it's been a little while since I've done a video. We have been busy in the beginning of January. Adam went back to work after a long winter break, and the kids and I have been settling into a new homeschool routine, and that's starting to kind of come together. Routines around here tend to shift with the seasons and with the baby's new nap schedules as those change and evolve, and so we feel like we're starting to nail down what works for our family this winter, and that's nice. And then on top of that, we've been busy with the Three Rivers Pantry Challenge. We've been focusing on using up a lot of our stored food here on the homestead and avoiding going to the grocery store, and that's been going well. We're about a quarter of the way through the challenge as of today. It's January 15th, and we run the challenge through March 1st. We won't be grocery shopping again until then. And so today I thought I'd update you on a little bit of that, but first we got a nice snow, and I don't know if you can see out there, the children are out playing. It's a Friday, so we don't have school, so they're enjoying building a little snow fort or doing whatever it is they enjoy doing out there on our snow days. And I have little Benjamin here with me, and so while the kids are all busy, we're going to work today on preserving some of our produce that should store well in a root cellar or whatever over the winter, but since we don't have a root cellar, our things tend to not last as long. Our winter squash that we harvested in, I believe, October is starting to get some spots on it. We just have a little bit of butternut squash left at this point, and so today I'm going to roast the rest of that, cut out the bad spots, and then we can puree that up and put it in the freezer. We like to use that for things like pumpkin bread or even butternut squash soup. Also, the rest of our storage apples, which we store in our overflow fridge out in our garage, there are 2 bushels, maybe a little bit less than 2 bushels left, and 1 bushel of that is starting to go a little soft and get a little wrinkly, and so it's time to cut some of that up and make applesauce or cut it up and freeze it in slices. I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do with that today. And then the third project for today, some of our garlic that we grew is starting to sprout. And I haven't had that problem in the past. Generally, my garlic stays good all the way through until I use it all up. But this was a different type of garlic that I bought this past year, and so maybe that's just part of it. And so to prevent that from spoiling and rotting, we're going to go ahead and puree all of that garlic up with a little bit of olive oil and freeze it in cubes. I really like to do that because, as much as I like to work in the kitchen, sometimes I get lazy and I really dislike peeling garlic cloves. Are you getting fussy back there? I really dislike peeling garlic cloves and chopping garlic. For some reason, that seems really tedious to me every day when I'm making meals, and so sometimes it's just easier for me to have it pre-chopped and pureed in the freezer. And what I've found this year is I'm tending to ignore my fresh garlic that's hanging there in the braids in the pantry, and I've used up all of my pureed garlic that was already in the freezer, and that's a problem. So today's the day we're just gonna bite the bullet and get it all ready and in the freezer to make meals a little easier. And I'm going to test a new method for that, and I'll take you along. So if you're along for the ride on this pantry challenge and all of this food prep sounds interesting to you, why don't you come along with me and we'll get ready and get working in the kitchen. Alright, so here I've got everything laid out that I want to work on today. I've got my bushel of apples, I've got some garlic, although I think I'm going to add more garlic that's hanging there, and then I've got my squash. As you can see, some of them are starting to get little spots on it, and that's not a big deal. We'll still eat the rest of this. We'll just cut out the bad stuff. And I think that's going to be my first task today, is to get this cut. What I'm going to do is slice this in half, cut out the bad spots, slice all the rest of this. I only have like 5 butternut squash left. And then I'm going to stick them face down on a cookie sheet and stick them in the oven and just roast them on 350 for an hour or so, however long it takes to cook the inside of it. So why don't we get started on that? I'm going to save all of my seeds from the butternut squash just as you would pumpkin seeds, because these can be roasted. What I do is put them in a bowl and fill it with water. The seeds will float to the top and kind of separate from any of the pulp that's left in there. And then I will add a little bit of salt to that water and let them soak overnight, and then we'll roast them the second day. Just like with your grains and with your beans and things like that, you want to soak them to make them easier to digest. Seeds are no different. The reason I put salt in while they're soaking is just some of that salt then kind of permeates the shell and adds a little salty flavor. I feel like they have better salty flavor when you do it in the salt water versus regular water. So that's what we're going to do with the seeds. Right, my squash is all sliced. Like I said, it's just halved. I do cut the kind of the tops off of the larger squash just so they fit a little more easily onto my cookie sheets. But all I'm going to do now is bake these in the oven on 350. I don't add anything to the inside, no oil or anything. I did wash the outside of these, so they're a little wet. That moisture will kind of help steam them, I guess, a little bit. And then once they're fully cooked, we'll scoop out all of the guts, put them in the blender, and we'll have a nice pumpkin puree. The next order of business, we're going to go ahead and make some applesauce. Today I'm going to use my crock pot to do that so that I don't have to stand and stir and worry about burning on the stove. All I have to do to make applesauce in the crock pot is just core my apples, make sure that they're washed. I'm going to leave my peels on and just stick the sliced apples in here with just a tiny bit of water on the bottom. That prevents sticking to the crock pot. And then we'll just put this on low for, the next couple of hours, and it'll continue to cook down. And then once it's cooked down, I'll run it through this old-fashioned mill that I have, and that will remove the peels. Or if I'm feeling even less motivated than that, to save the nutrition of the peels, what I can do is just throw the cooked down apples with the peels into the blender, and then the peels will just blend right in and the kids won't even notice it. So whatever way you like to do it, you can do it either way. And let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to fish through these. Some of them are more wrinkly than others. We're going to use the wrinkled up ones first. Some of these can probably be salvaged for fresh eating today for lunch for the kids. Alright, I got my apples all cored and in the crock pot, or at least as many as I could fit in here. I was able to salvage quite a bit of the apples out of that bushel and stuck them in a drawer in my fridge inside, hoping that if they're in here instead of out in the garage that we'll eat through them faster. Right now I'm just trying to prioritize eating up as much of the fresh stuff that we have available so I don't need to touch my freezer stores and my canned goods as much. So for example, potatoes, I have some that are starting to sprout, and so my goal right now is just to eat through those fresh potatoes before I get into like the frozen hash browns and the canned potatoes that I have on the shelves. That is the goal right now. We have lots of carrots also in our fridge that are holding up very well, but I also have a lot of shredded carrot and some canned carrot available, and so it just makes more sense right now on this pantry challenge and just in general so that there's less food waste. Let's just eat the fresh stuff up and then not touch the frozen and canned goods. So this applesauce likely will not be eaten today, even though it's so delicious when it's warm and freshly cooked. What I'm going to plan to do is get this in jars and either can it or put it in the freezer, and then hopefully the kids, hi Benjamin, hopefully the kids then will eat fresh apples here for the next couple days. All right, let's get this going. And my last chore for today is to do something with my garlic. As I mentioned before, it is starting to sprout. See the little green stem that's starting to grow out of it. And that's not a big deal. It's still edible and good to eat as of now. But if I continue to let this go much longer, it's going to start getting soft and mushy and not be good for eating. So this is sort of pressing today that we get this done. But peeling cloves of garlic, like I mentioned, is just so tedious. I don't know why, I just hate to do it. And so what I'm going to try today is a method that I saw on online and that other people had recommended. You stick them in a container and you shake the cloves, and eventually the skins of these will fall off. So let's go ahead and test this out and see if it works. If it doesn't work, I'm going to have to recruit some kid help here to get these peeled, because there's no way I'm going to get all of my garlic peeled today on my own before lunch. So let's try this method and see what happens. So I'm going to test this method with just a small amount of garlic here. This was just 1 braid worth of garlic cloves. I'm going to shake this here in this container, and hopefully if it works like I saw it did online, hopefully then all of these just garlic papery peels will fall off, and then I can fish out the cloves and put them directly into the food processor to puree. That is going to save me so much time. So I am like hoping that this works. Let's see what happens. It's working! Oh my goodness, look! Cloves without peels on. Ha ha ha! Wow, what a time saver. Okay, when I had seen this done with other people, they used 2 bowls, like 2 metal bowls, so I didn't know if the plastic would be hard enough, but it is working. This is amazing. I don't have to bother my kids to help me with this today. So my cloves are coming out perfectly without having to peel them. Okay, this is gonna work. So now I'm just gonna put these into the food processor here. Let me grab that. And once I get a full batch here, I'll go ahead and process these down into a puree. I'll show you how I do that here in a minute. But I'm gonna pull down some more braids of garlic after I get these out of here, and do the same thing until I get through. I'm gonna probably do most of it. Maybe leave 1 braid hanging in case I need fresh garlic for something that isn't pureed. But otherwise, I would much rather have it all pureed up for convenience use. I'm so excited, you guys. I can't believe this worked. Benjamin fell asleep. Oh, I'm gonna wake him up talking. Back to sleep, buddy. There we go. Benjamin fell asleep even while I was shaking the garlic. So apparently shaking garlic is a good way to get your baby to nap. Well, I did probably about 2/3 of my garlic. I got it peeled, and I'm really glad that I did, because it was starting to get some spots on it. So I had to really pick through, and I had to throw some of the cloves into the chicken bucket, unfortunately. This is why laziness never pays off. I was just being lazy by not using my fresh garlic over the last couple months and digging into my frozen stores, and unfortunately now that has cost me some of my garlic. So I will not make that mistake in the future. The third of the garlic, I have like 2 or 3 braids that I left hanging just because I am not going to have time to get to it today before I need to make lunch for the children. And so that I'll probably have to get to this weekend and do the same thing that I'm doing right now. So I filled my food processor with as many cloves as I thought would fit in here. And then the rest of the cloves I just put in a little storage container, and I'm going to freeze these raw, just like this. I know that sounds crazy. I didn't even peel these ones, but these are the ones that I'm going to use for chicken broth or beef broth, things like that in the future. When I make my broth, I don't even peel my onions or my garlic. I just kind of rinse it off and toss some cloves in, toss the whole onion bulb in, and that works just fine. And so no need to take the time to peel these if they're just going to end up in broth. So, and then the rest of these, what I'm going to do is add just a little bit of olive oil. I'm going to put just enough so that it helps kind of puree it down into a pulp, but not a ton. When I go to use these, typically what I'll do is, let me show you. I've used all my garlic cubes up, but this is sort of the same idea. This is a cube of olive oil and basil, so just pretend that this has garlic in it instead of the basil. So what I'll do is take a little cube of it out when I want to use it in a dish and just toss it straight into the pan, and the oil that's in this will help kind of cook up the garlic. So it's not a big deal to freeze it with the oil, since I'm going to use the oil anyways. You could use water and freeze it into cubes like that if you don't like to have your garlic with a lot of extra oil in it. But for me, it's such a minuscule amount that I don't mind the little extra fat in our dishes. Even when I go to make something like soup and I'm tossing a couple cubes of the garlic in, the oil goes into the soup and whatever will eat it, and the fat is helpful for the children and healthy for them anyway. So this is what we're going to end up doing. So just like that with the basil cubes, what I'm going to do is start this in the food processor and just drizzle in enough oil to get this pureed down. The oil or the water is necessary, otherwise this is just going to chunk up and stick to the sides of your food processor, and you're going to have a really hard time getting this into something that will be kind of liquidy. So let's go ahead and get this done. There are a lot of different containers that I use to kind of freeze these little cubes of various herbs and things like garlic. Here's one. This is actually made by Ball Canning, and it has a nifty little lid, and it gives you these little spaces to freeze cubes. I really like this one. This currently has pulp from fermented hot sauce in it that I just haven't removed from it, but if I show you, it's silicone, so they just kind of pop out, and then you have a nice little cube. So that's in there. I have these. This is a baby food maker. So if you pureed some vegetables or some fruits or something like that, and then you wanted to freeze them, that's what this is for. It's by Fresh Baby, and it also has a lid, and then you just pop out a cube or two when you want to heat it up to make for your baby. But this also works well for freezing little cubes. I have, let me show you this, these little silicone things to make ice cubes, or to make, sometimes I have a set that are out there that I don't use in my kitchen that you use to make soap or whatever. I keep this little smiley face one in my kitchen to make ice cubes for the kids sometimes, but when I've run out of space elsewhere, I've used these to freeze my garlic cubes before, and they work really well. But today what I'm going to use is a mini cupcake or a mini whoopie pie pan. I'm just going to scoop out my puree, put it in here, and then I will flash freeze it in the freezer in this. Once the little pucks of garlic are frozen, I'll pop them out, and then I'll stick them in a bag or a container of some sort to store them in the freezer for long-term storage. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to take my pureed garlic and I'm going to put it in here to freeze. Here's the texture that my garlic turned out. I didn't want it completely pureed down to, nothing. I do want to have some little bits of garlic, and so this is the texture that I decided on today. And as I mentioned, I'm just going to scoop out a little bit and stick it in my little whoopie pie pan here, and we'll go from there. If it were summer and I had pureed all of this and I wanted to preserve it, I would probably get out my dehydrator, and I would lay down some parchment paper on my dehydrator trays, and I would spread this puree out onto that parchment paper and then dehydrate it, and then I could break that up and turn it into garlic powder or minced garlic or something like that. And I do that quite often in the summer. However, when it is winter and we're all stuck indoors and I can't open the windows to air out the house or run the dehydrator outside like I do sometimes, dehydrating garlic can be very stinky and it will permeate everything in your house. You're going to smell like garlic for days afterwards. And so just to spare my family of that, I'm deciding not to dehydrate this right now. And so freezing it works just fine. Now I'm out of space on this tray, so I'm going to get something else now to fill. So this one was a whoopie pie pan, so you can tell it's kind of shallow. These will be like smaller pucks. Now I'm going to use a mini cupcake pan to do the rest, and these are twice the size, so these will just be bigger pucks, and that'll be good. Now I'll have some choices when I go to pull these out of the freezer. I can either have a double serving or a single serving. Want to get every last bit of this out. You know, you work so hard. I planted that seed in the fall of 2019, and we tended the garden that this garlic grew in all last year through 2020, and we harvested it and we braided it, and it's a shame to let any of this go to waste because so much effort went into it on our part over the last, year and a half. And so I'm really kicking myself for not taking better care of my garlic braids that were in the house, because that seems very wasteful. At least the chickens will enjoy the ones that were starting to get spotty, and I'm sure that that's healthy for them. So I guess not all is lost. Alright, so this garlic is done now. Like I said, I'm just going to stick these in the freezer, flash freeze them, and later on I will pop them out and stick them in a container, most likely a container like this with a lid, and then put it back in the freezer for storage. And now my butternut squash has finished baking up in the oven, and if I were to flip this over, yeah, it's going to be nice and soft and easy to scoop out. Now, since my food processor is dirty from the garlic and I don't really want to clean that out, that's going to need a nice thorough washing in the dishwasher to get the garlic stench out. I don't want my butternut squash smelling like garlic. So instead, I'm going to use my blender. All I'm going to do is scoop the guts, the orange part, out of the butternut squash, put it in the blender, puree it, and then I can put that in jars to freeze. I like to freeze it in either pint or half pint sizes, because most of my pumpkin bread or pumpkin muffin recipes will call for 1 or 2 cups, and having it in the pint and half pint amounts is just really convenient. It's all measured out for me. All I have to do then is thaw it the night before and it's ready in the morning. So I'm going to go ahead and get started doing this now. Normally, I would let these cool for a little bit before I do this. However, I am rushed for time. The kids have all come in now from playing outside and are probably very hungry, so I need to get this, I want to get this done and out of the way so that I can move on to fixing them their lunch. So we're just going to use hot squash right now. Alright, I've scooped out most of the pulp, and the rest of the skins and the pulp that's connected will go in the chicken bucket, and they will eat that, skins and all, so none of that will be wasted, which is wonderful. And now I'm just going to go ahead and blend this and get it all pureed. It's all blended up and it's beautiful and orange. This is why a lot of companies often sell butternut squash as pumpkin puree, because it's indistinguishable with that bright orange color, and it doesn't taste any different really. So yeah, that blended up nicely. Now I'm going to go ahead and fill my jars with the puree for freezing. People always ask me what the secret is to freezing in glass canning jars without having them break, because I freeze everything in my glass jars. Broth, berries, purees like this, leftover soup, you name it, it goes into jars. And for me, the secret is I try to use wide mouth jars as much as possible. If you use a jar that has a narrow mouth and you fill it up past where the wider part begins to narrow, you're going to increase your risk of breaking. So if I am going to use a narrow jar like this, I'm only going to fill it up to the very top of where it's wide. And then that's another key. Even with the wide mouth jars, you don't want to overfill them. Always leave a pretty significant headspace on the jar to leave room for expansion while it is freezing. Another tip to prevent breaking is to always make sure whatever you put in your jars is completely cooled before it goes in the freezer. For example, this puree is hot, and so what I'm going to do is fill my jars, leave it out on the counter until it gets to room temperature, and then I'm going to stick it in the fridge probably overnight to let it cool down before I transfer it to the freezer. If it's hot at all and you stick it in the freezer, that temperature difference is going to potentially cause your glass to break. Hi, Benjamin. A final tip is to not have your glass jars touching inside the freezer. Whatever shelf you put them on, you want to try to leave a little bit of space, because as things get shifted around and moved, that frozen glass can be fragile. And so if the jars end up banging up against one another, you can have a break. And there's nothing more frustrating than going to all of this work and then having a broken jar. So I have great results. The first couple years I froze in glass, I kind of learned from my mistakes, but now maybe one jar a year breaks on me, and it's usually my fault. Sometimes I'm impatient, and like I'll get my frozen berries out of the freezer, and instead of waiting to let them thaw a little bit, I'll take a knife and start poking in there to break them up or something like that, and just the knife hitting the jar can cause it to break, and that's usually my fault. But otherwise, freezing in glass is a great alternative to having to use disposable plastic products or, other expensive methods. I have canning jars galore, so why not use them to freeze in as well. Benjamin here has been starting to eat some solid foods since I last spoke to you about that. In addition to his broth, he's had a little bit of cooked carrot so far. And I think squash might be something that we're going to try, coming up here soon. I might add it to his broth and kind of mix it around in there. So I'm going to freeze a little bit of this in those little silicone molds that I was talking about, so that he can have some to enjoy later on. You can come down here, hang out with me. Oh, go potty? Just like with the garlic, I'll go ahead and flash freeze this, and then I'll transfer these little cubes of... Are you going to come up here with me? Why don't you come up? I'll transfer these little cubes of squash puree into something else later on, but I'm just going to stick it in the freezer like this for now. You want to say hi? What's the matter? What's the matter? Do you want to help me? Yeah? Okay, let's get one. Can you help me? Okay, so let's switch. I'm going to switch. Good job. Did you do it?
Yeah.
Did you do it?
Yeah.
Okay, let's get this out of here. Do you want to try it?
Yeah.
It's pumpkin. Here, lick it. You like it? You like the pumpkin? You want more? More? Want one more? See, if I were to put cubed butternut squash on his plate for dinner, he would probably not want to eat it, but look, he'll eat it. pureed up for some reason, so go figure. You're so nice. Okay, hold on. We're going to say goodbye now.
Goodbye.
Well, first let me say something, okay? And we hope that something that we've done today here has been helpful for you, and we hope that you're enjoying following along with us on Instagram on the Three Rivers Challenge, the Pantry Challenge that we do every year. I've been really enjoying sharing our meals that we make there and seeing what everybody else who's following along and playing along on the challenge, what they're doing with their food storage. And so with that, we're gonna say goodbye. Hope you're having a blessed day, friends. Bye. Can you say bye-bye? Say bye-bye.